this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. It is part one of a three-part series titled The Passport Prospects. And in this episode, I'm going to share my personal scouting reports of the top big men from the international ranks in the 2025 NBA Draft. Big shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, flying solo today, but the crew, whether it's James Barlowe, Kristen Peak, Leaf Tulane, and Richard Stamen, they will be back very soon because June is, it's here. By the time you listen to this, it could be June 1st or June 2nd, which means the NBA draft is right around the corner. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll be in New York for the draft. But before I get into this episode, I want to let you know that if you have not subscribed to the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, please subscribe, like, share, comment, and click the bell so you can be notified every time we drop an episode because, in my opinion, I'm a little biased, but we are your best source for NBA draft content. Of course, I'm biased. I should be, but I'm also confident. But we are your daily source for NBA draft content. We're dropping episodes 5 days a week. If not 5 days a week, you're going to get at least 20 episodes a month. And this episode is all about the international prospects that are big men in the 2025 NBA draft. Some of these prospects I have seen in person. Some I've done extensive film work on. So I'm just going to give you my personal scouting reports on some of the top bigs in the 2025 draft from the international ranks. And the first person I want to start off with, or first prospect I want to start off with, is Joan Beringer. Now, I've been to France numerous times. One thing about France is I have a very hard time understanding how the words are spelled a certain way, and it sounds totally different. So if you're French, pardon the mispronunciation of the name. In English, it looks like his name is Joan Beringer, but his name might be Joan Beringer. I have no idea. But I'm talking about the French big man that is playing in Croatia right now. He is a late bloomer, the epitome of a late bloomer, but he has skyrocketed up draft boards with his play this season. Now, if you are not familiar with international basketball and you hear me spit out these stats, you're going to be wondering, like, why is a guy averaging 6 points a game or just doesn't have really good numbers considered a first-round pick? One, the pace is a lot slower. The game is not as long. And then if you're a young prospect, you're usually not trusted to play heavy minutes. So that is the reason why some of these numbers aren't going to stand out to you. Now, he's a player that I'm pretty familiar with. I actually saw him play live in a tournament. It was an Adidas Next Generation tournament in Dubai last spring. Now, I'll be totally honest. I did not think he was a 2025 NBA draft guy. I thought maybe 26, maybe 27. Again, still pretty raw. Some people think he's a first-round pick. I can't get with that right now, but I definitely think he is a draftable prospect. But here are my notes on Beringer, or Beringer. He's a bouncy vertical athlete. He's quick off his feet. He can serve as a lob threat or a dunker spot finisher. He has a defined role as an athletic play finisher. He scores most of his points on dump-offs, cuts to the rim, hustle plays, and as a rim runner. But one of the things that I really like about his game is that he does sprint the floor in transition. He has a live body. He plays with energy. He rebounds, especially on the offensive glass. He has the mobility and lateral quickness to defend in space and on the perimeter, which is very important in today's NBA. But he also shows a lot of promise as a shot blocker or rim protector. I totally get the intrigue and why he's considered such an alluring prospect. Again, late bloomer, not a guy that you heard about 5 years ago as a potential draft pick or someone that is going to, be a star in Europe. So I like the progression that he's made. Again, I've seen him play in person. I want to say I saw him play about four times. And I'm not seeing him as a first-round pick, but I could be totally wrong. But he does have the position to where it is probably the easiest to come in and make an impact. If he plays hard and he can space the floor vertically. I think he can make an impact. Now, my concerns are he has a very, very, very limited offensive game, doesn't space the floor, doesn't really handle the ball. Now, that's bonus if he can handle the ball as a 5-man, but doesn't really like make plays out of DHOs or anything like that. He has a thin frame, and he's definitely going to need to get stronger. And right now, he's kind of like Asa Newell in a sense, to where he has the ideal frame and size of a 4, but not the skill set, even though Asa Newell is more skilled. But he has the game of a 5, so I think he's somewhat of a tweener. Now, he is young. He's listed at about 6'10", 230, so he does have plenty of time to put on weight and get stronger. To me, I see him as about a top 35, maybe top 40 prospect. Like I said, some see him as a first rounder. I think he is a ways away. But like I mentioned, he does have the game that could be a little bit easier for him to make the transition. But that is my thoughts on Joan Beringer or Joan Beringer. All right, the next prospect I want to talk about is another player that I've had the opportunity to evaluate and watch in person, and it is Bogi Markovic from Serbia. The first time I saw him play, I want to say it was at a tournament in 2022, so it was early 2022. It was in Serbia. It was a pretty good tournament. Zachary Risache played in that tournament. Nikola Topic. You know, the Nikolas from Serbia. It is very easy to get Nikola Jovic, Nikola Topic, and Nikola Jokic. It's easy to get them confused, even though they all have different games. But Nikola Topic was in that tournament. There was a few other prospects in that tournament that it slips my mind off the top of my head. A few of them are going to play in college basketball this year, whether they are or next season. But Markovic was one of the players that stood out to me at that tournament. When I first saw him, I want to say he was probably like 6'9", and I would guess 200 pounds. He was very, very thin, but I had in my notes that he was skinny tough, that he competed. He wasn't afraid to throw his skinny body around, and he was a player that, like I said, he stood out to me. And I kept notes on him because I thought that he was going to be a prospect. So here are my notes on him. And my notes on him are really like a combination of notes from 2022 and 24, 25. So I have a pretty decent sample size of watching him play. One of the things that stood out most to me was that I liked that he was fluid and mobile and coordinated. He runs the floor. He's a promising shooter. And that has been one of the biggest revelations this year. He shot 37% from 3, but I like the fact that he also has good feel as a passer and a ball mover. He can whip live dribble passes. He can make plays in transition. He can get the rebound and push the rock. He can post up. Now, at the time when I first saw him, I thought he was a little bit too thin to be effective in the post. He was easily bumped and pushed out of his spots, but as he's getting stronger and as he continues to add weight and strength, I think he is going to be a solid post player, at least the type that's able to exploit mismatches if there's a smaller wing or guard on him. And then if you have to help or double, he does have the vision and the feel to be a good connective passer. But I like the footwork in the low post. I like the fact that he did bang and throw his skinny body around. And he showed some flashes then of being able to handle the ball in space, whether it's DHOs or if he had isolation, if there was a big that was a little slower than him, he was able to put the ball on the floor and make plays. And then if he's knocking down shots, he has the mobility and the fluidity to be able to attack closeouts. There's a play that stood out to me where he drove to the rim and he dodged the defender with the Euro step. It may sound simple and routine, but at 6'11", there's not a lot of guys at 6'11" that have the agility and coordination and mobility to Euro step around defenders. He draws fouls with his activity. Again, likes to throw that skinny body around. He's not skinny anymore, but I just think that he just finds ways to impact the game. He can rebound and run. He has a soft touch around the rim, good outlet passer, can make plays out of the high post. And it's his defensive versatility that I think has really intrigued NBA scouts. Again, I keep saying it, but the mobility and fluidity and coordination allows him to be somewhat of a good defender in space. How it scales up and translates to NBA-level athletes, that is to be determined. That's like the multi-million-dollar question. The concerns I had was sometimes he settled for too many threes, and I thought a lot of that was related to him just not being strong and physical enough, but physical enough to continue to take the pounding. Like I said, he'll throw his body around, but it started to wear down on him later on in games, and then that's when I thought he would settle for too many threes. And yeah, just the concerns are he just needs to continue to get stronger. But like I mentioned, I love the fact that he has added to his game as far as expanding his range over the last few years. And this year he had a good year. He averaged 13.7 points, 6.8 rebounds, 2.7 assists per game by shooting 54% from the floor. I'm just rounding up here, and 37% from three. So he is one of the international prospects in this class that actually had good statistical numbers and produced in the league that he played in. His draft range is second round pick. You never know with all the players that decided to return to school. There's a team that may like him in the first round. I think he's a little bit further ahead as far as skill set and development than Joan Beringer, but Beringer is the better athlete and rim protector. But I love Markovic's skill. I've seen him play at Basketball Without Borders a couple years ago in Utah. But I just like what he brings to the table. And I think that he has a pretty good chance of being a rotation player in the NBA, especially if the shooting continues to progress. All right, up next, we're going to talk about one of my favorite prospects in the last few years, and that is Chinese big man Hansen Yang. And I'm going to explain why I love him and why some people are not sold on Hansen Yang as an NBA prospect. NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. And DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It is called If They Swoosh, You Score. And any time a player drops 50 or more points in the playoff game, Dash Pass members will score a free three-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. All you have to do is place an order for $20 or more. Use the code Wingstop50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. And the offer is valid from noon until midnight the day after the game. In terms apply. So if you've ever looked at your delivery fees and thought, there's got to be a better way, this is getting expensive. And with Dash Pass, you get $0 delivery fees and exclusive perks like this one. So imagine how much money you would save over the course of a season. So again, sign up for Dash Pass. You can unlock this deal and more exclusive deals all season long. And when a player scores 50 points or more, if you are a Dash Pass member, you get a free three-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop, but you have to use the promo code Wingstop50, and it has to be the very next day. So again, that is Dash Pass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. All right, second segment. Let's talk about Hansen Yang, one of my favorite prospects. And Hansen Yang is very, very divisive. There are people that like him. I've had scouts tell me they think he's a first-round pick, and I've had people tell me that they do not think he is an NBA player. I'm on the side of I think he's an NBA player. Great size. 7'2", 7'1", depending on where you get your information at. Average 16.2 points, 11 rebounds, 2.7 blocks, 2.8 steals per game in the CBA, which is the Chinese Basketball Association, the top league in China. Shot 59%. I've polled a lot of different people about Hansen Yang just to see like where people are. I've talked to some of my American friends that play in the CBA. And 9 times out of 10, if you're an American player playing in the CBA, you have NBA on your resume. So you have a pretty decent understanding of the NBA game. You are a star in college for the most part. And everybody that I've talked to that has played against Hansen Yang in the CBA believes that he is an NBA defender or an NBA player. Now, some scouts, like I said, I had a scout tell me at the NBA Combine, first round pick, they love him. I've had agents tell me before he signed with Clutch that he's a guy that they would have loved to sign because they think he's a first-round player. He was a little bit difficult to reach as far as like in the recruiting process. I mean, I know an agency that went through one of their players that has a sneaker deal in China, and they try to go through those connections to get in touch with Hansen Yang. And then there are other agencies that I know that have players that are superstars, and most superstars in the NBA go to China during the summer for a tour. They were trying to connect with him there. So it just depends on who you speak with. There's some people that really, really love Hansen Yang, and there's some that just think that he's a little bit too slow. And then I just don't like that some people like to bring up the failures of other Chinese prospects and then compare Hansen Yang or wonder if he's able to make it, just because history says that there are some other Chinese prospects that did not stand out. So here's my notes on Hansen Yang. He first caught my attention at the U19s. He averaged 13 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, and led the tournament in blocks at 5 per game. He had some really good performances against Alex Sarr, who was the number 2 pick, good defender, and Ethan Almanza. And then I want to say like his first year playing professionally in China, he averaged 15 and 11, 3.9 assists, 2.2 blocks per game. He is a huge, massive interior presence at 7'2". Now, you're going to think I'm crazy here, but when I watched him play in youth tournaments or FIBA international tournaments, and even in the Chinese CBA, there's times where he looks like Nikola Jokic in the post, not necessarily handling the ball and bringing it up like Jokic, and doesn't process the game as fast as Jokic. Nobody does. But the passes that he makes, the rebounding, the fact that he doesn't look like he is moving fast, and he still put up good numbers. Doesn't space the floor yet, but he did knock down a 3, maybe a 3 or 2 at the NBA Combine. But he's a phenomenal passer. Like, he had one particular play at the Combine where he got the ball at the top of the key, and he threw like a pass to a cutter from a weird angle. He has really good feel as a passer. He's very advanced as a passer. And as far as like low post, when I say he's like Jokic in a sense, is that he just has counter moves on top of counter moves, from head fakes to up and unders. Very, very skilled, very good touch around the rim for a man his size. And he is one of the most intriguing bigs in this class. He rebounds. I think he moves solidly. I think the way he moves is a little bit underrated. One of the things I heard consistently from scouts at the NBA Combine was they thought he moved a lot better and he looked better in person than he did in film. There's one particular team that told me they absolutely did not like him from watching his film, but they have changed like their stance on him after seeing him live. One of the things about the Combine that I didn't like for him was that the team that he was on, if I'm not mistaken, Boogie Flynn was supposed to be on that team. Boogie Flynn pulled out, left him with the team that didn't have point guards, and they just struggled making low post feeding him in the low post. Like, they could not make entry passes. There were times where he had smalls on him. He couldn't get the ball, and he showed some frustration, which, some people may not like that, but to me it was a sign of just how competitive he is. Like, hey, man, get me the ball. Get me the ball down here. I got a mismatch. And he had some pretty good games at the Combine. Another thing that I like about him, outside of him being like a crafty low post scorer with a deep bag of up and under moves and shoulder fakes, is that he does have somewhat of an old school low post bruiser game mixed with new school playmaking. There's a play that stands out where Alex Sarr was guarding him, and he just put that big shoulder to Alex Sarr's chest and got to his spots. And he was just a tough matchup on the FIBA youth levels. And like I said, he was solid in the CBA, averaged a double-double. But it's the passing instincts. It is the ability to rebound. And I think the shot blocking, even though he was a dominant shot blocker in China, I don't know how well that's going to translate. Now, the big concerns is why some people are very doubtful that he's an NBA prospect is he just may struggle defending in space. And then at the Combine, you could see, it was clear as day that the speed adjustment to the game was challenging for him. I do think that that's something that can be fixed. Also, I feel like another thing that just probably is not mentioned, and I know this well from living in China, is that body clock from transitioning from China to the United States or back. It is tough. It is very tough. I mean, I've lived in China. I've lived there 2 different times. I've toured there with some like teams from the United States. I mean, at one point I went to like 12 cities in 18 days on a tour. And even some of the very, very gifted athletes we brought from the United States just struggled with the time difference. There were times where their legs just had dead legs because depending on where you're at and the time of the year, it could be a 13-hour time difference. So even when I was living there, it was very difficult to adjust. So with that being said, I think some of the conditioning concerns that people had may just be related to jet lag and him just adjusting to the time difference and the speed and so on. But then he also struggled at Summer League last year. I just thought the pace at Summer League was a little fast for him when the Chinese national team played a few games in the 2024 Summer League. The passing didn't show there. He had only 3 assists, but 14 turnovers. Another concern is right now he doesn't really face up and put the ball on the floor. And a last concern is at times he's aggressive, but then there are times where he's not consistently aggressive, and he has a little bit of gentle giant in him. But I think that's fixable, maybe cultural. And that's something that you have to factor in. But overall, I love the skill set. I love the size, the passing. I think you may think I'm crazy. I think he can play a similar role to what Zach Edey played in Memphis. May not be a guy that can close games for you, but he could be a guy that can give you minutes where he's a play finisher, where he's drawing fouls, and because it's taking multiple guys to box him out. Not as big as Edey, but I think he's more skilled around the block. They both have good touch, but I think as far as like counters and actual post moves, I'm going with Hansen Yang. And maybe he can be Zubac, Ivica Zubac. He didn't move extremely well his rookie year. I mean, the Lakers basically dumped him. I think they dumped him and Michael Beasley for Mike Muscala or something like that. The Lakers didn't believe in Zubac. Zubac got better every year. So I think that Hansen Yang is an NBA player. But there's some that think I am totally crazy for even considering it. All right, the next player I want to talk about is a man of mystery. Australia's Rocco Zikarsky, 7'4", just a massive human being, had a very, very disappointing year for the Brisbane Bullets, averaged just 4.7 points, 3.5 rebounds, and shot 50% from the floor. I haven't seen him in person, but I have been tracking him and following him for the last few years. One thing I'll say about him is that when he played against his peers, he looked every bit of an NBA prospect. Yes, he was bigger than everybody else. He has some moments where he looks really aggressive, but then when he plays in the NBL against grown men, it's a totally, totally different situation because, yes, he's still bigger, but the lack of strength and Australia is a physical league. Australia is a really physical league. You can see that he struggles with physicality. And this year he dealt with an injury, and it was pretty clear to me that the coaching staff had lost some faith in him. So the part that was just really, really disappointing to me was that he was at the Combine, but he did not participate. I thought playing at the Combine would have been a good opportunity for him to show NBA teams why he's there, why he was invited to the Combine. Like, if you're only averaging 4 points a game and 3.5 rebounds and your coaching staff lose confidence in you and you still get invited to the NBA Combine, that means the teams want to see you play, not just measure out and do a pro day. They want to see you play. I thought for him that he missed an opportunity, and maybe he chose not to play because he wasn't, or his agency or whoever is representing him didn't think the guard play would be beneficial to him. I mentioned it with Hansen Yang that there were plenty of times where he was missed on mismatches. So that could be part of the reason. But again, the physical tools are there, the size. I think he moves pretty well. It's just you just have no idea what you're getting with him. I think that there's a team that may take a flyer on him and draft him late in the second round. However, I haven't done the research, but to me it would make sense for him to go to college. But then again, maybe it's a chess game where you don't want to expose him too much. Maybe you just figure if you're representing him, the team's already intrigued. They've already invited him to the combine. Let's put him in situations where he's playing one-on-none in workouts, and maybe a team will bite the bullet and they'll select him. And if he's not good, then at least 3 years of money and contracts are secured. You just never know with what's going on behind the scenes, but I am disappointed that he did not play at the NBA Combine. All right, I want to talk about 3 more international bigs. One is Lachlan Olbrich from Australia, 6'9". He averaged 8.7 points, 3.8 rebounds, shot 60% from the floor in Australia. Had a really, really good week in Chicago. Started off at the G League Elite Camp, got moved up to the NBA Combine. He had a game where he was like 7 of 8 from the floor. Just a tough matchup. How it translates to the NBA, I have no idea. I've talked to some scouts that say, man, if he goes to college, he is going to be an All-American. He's the type of guy that's going to win you games. And he did play college basketball in the 2022-23 season. He was at UC Riverside. He was the Big West Freshman of the Year. He averaged 11.6 rebounds per game. He's just skilled. I mean, kind of has a big body, like just like a broad chest, kind of a bruiser in a sense. Actually reminds me of a little bit like Tyler Hansborough. Now, Tyler Hansborough had a phenomenal college career. I think he was a lottery pick. NBA career didn't last long, but Olbrich has a little bit of that in him. He's just going to impact the game by being physical, by, grabbing rebounds, cutting to the rim, being at the right place at the right time, just knows how to put the ball in the basket. It may not be in the most, I don't want to say traditional sense. Maybe he is a traditional old school 4, but maybe not the way that the game looks from a 4-man in the modern NBA. Because if you look at the league, a lot of guys that are 4s are natural 3s. And even if they start at the 3, they probably finish games at the 4. So Olbrich doesn't necessarily fit that archetype. He is like your old school, like I said, just kind of like your banger, your guy that thrives on physicality, has good touch around the rim, whether it's like running hook shots, just effective, impactful, has a really good knack for just finding gaps in the defense and doesn't need a lot of touches to score. And he's a good passer. So I don't know how it translates to the NBA. And I know in workouts, guys are probably like, I don't want to go against this guy in a workout because everything he does is just about being physical and initiating contact and finishing through contact. May not look the prettiest as far as how it scales up to today's NBA, but he's a guy that I think that, like I said, teams are going to take a real deep look at. All right, let's talk about Michael Ruzic, who played in Spain, but he's from Croatia. Very, very interesting prospect, but also very difficult to evaluate. Did not have a good year on paper. Averaged just 3.3 points per game, 1.7 rebounds. Dealt with a hand injury that sidelined him for at least 2 or 3 months. Was also playing in Spain. Spain, to me, is the best domestic league outside of the NBA. And there's a difference that I don't think a lot of people know. There's your Euro League, and then you have your other competitions in Europe where you're playing against teams from other countries. And then you have the domestic league, which you're just playing against teams that are within your country. And to me, Spain has the best domestic league. I mean, you have Real Madrid and Barcelona, 2 of the teams that are, EuroLeague powers that are always competing against each other. But you also have some pretty solid teams that are in the ACB. But the ACB is tough, and it's a little difficult for young players to play significant minutes. But Ruzic is interesting. Made a big name for himself at the Treviso camp or Euro camp last year in Italy. Outplayed some of the top American prospects that put him on the radar. Moves well for his size. A legit 7-footer. But this year, just what made teams so intrigued by him, it was just very, very, very small doses of that. Really struggled from 3. Shot just 24% from 3. And also just 33% from the foul line. Now, again, he did have a hand injury, and he was facing an uphill battle to get consistent minutes. And then he went to the combine. He measured well, but he was just outmatched against Maxime Reynaud. and Maxime Reynaud played one game, and the one game that people think has skyrocketed his draft stock, unfortunately, Michael Ruzic was guarding him, and it was just a total like mismatch there. Think about it, Ruzic is like 18 years old, one of the younger players in the draft. Reynaud was a guy that averaged like 20 and 11, so he was just outplayed there. Some people still think that teams are going to select him in the early second round. They're just intrigued by the upside, but I think it is risky. I think for him, he needs to go and develop another year before entering the draft. Maybe if he goes to college, or maybe if he goes to another situation in Europe where he's allowed to play, then maybe he could be a first round pick. But I think it's very risky to keep him in the draft for 2025. And the last player I want to talk about is Mo Faye, who's playing in Italy. He's from Senegal. Just your typical rim runner, athletic, vertical lob threat. Had a surprising year, listed at 6'10", 220. He averaged 9 points, 6.8 rebounds per game, 1.5 blocks per game, shot 65% from the floor. The main appeal with him is that he's long, he's athletic, has a good motor, loves to crash the offensive glass, can play as a vertical lob threat, a guy that likes to run the floor in transition. Pretty good pop as far as just bounce off the floor, which is very important as far as being a lob threat. And his role is very simple, it's defined. A rim runner, play finisher. The concerns are he just has absolutely no game outside of the paint, no touch, very raw offensively, and just doesn't really make good decisions with the ball. Like as far as like his turnovers are probably like 8 times more turnovers than assists. But there is some intrigue for a guy that can provide minutes as a shot blocker, a rebounder, and vertical lob threat. So Mo Faye is a guy that I would select in the second round of the 2025 NBA draft. I was actually surprised that he was not invited to the NBA Combine. But overall, I like Mo Faye, who is from Senegal, but he is currently playing in Italy. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. Stay tuned, because I have 2 more episodes. I'm going to talk about the top international wings, and then I'm going to talk about the top ball handlers from the international ranks in the 2025 NBA draft. Once again, it's Rafael, and I am out of here.